Welcome to Studio 58A Live here at the Jamaica Information Service, our discussion program coming to you live online. I'm your host, Vaughn Davis. Thank you to everyone joining us wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much for your eyes. We really do appreciate it. And like we have your attention, do us a favor, man. Send us a question or two or 13,000 so we can have a very, very lively discussion. And as you watch, remember to tune in, share, tell a friend, all of that stuff. All right. Now, deadlift. The thing will cause a whole heap of problems and broke up how many families. Well, today we're hoping to help bring some solutions to that situation, especially in situations where the estate left behind is deemed small, on the smaller side, you know what I mean? Now today, Administrator General and CEO of the Administrator General's Department, Mrs. Stacie Ann Carty, is here with us to discuss the government's recent decision to change the classification of a small estate from that valuing $100,000 to that valuing $1.5 million. We're going to get into the details and get all of the rationale behind that. So first of all, welcome, Ms. Carty. Are you there? Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, pleasant afternoon. Thanks for having us.
All right, fantastic. Now, first things first, before I even go any further, I like to start at the beginning. Let's just establish who the Administrator General's Department is, what you do, what your role and function is, and what person should be aware of when it comes to the work you do.
Okay, so you spoke about deadlift, and that is one of our core businesses. As a Jamaican, you would know that means when somebody has died and left behind assets. So it could be a motor vehicle, it could be a piece of land, it could be anything, money in a bank, it could be salaries, NHT refunds, any assets that you can think about that somebody would have left behind. So what we do, we're the person, unfortunately, a lot of Jamaicans don't like to talk about this topic, although we know it's inevitable. And so where somebody has died and didn't make a will, and especially if they have beneficiaries, as persons who are to get their assets under 18, we investigate what they have died and left behind. We investigate if they owe anybody any money, and we also ensure that we pay all the bills, get all the money in. If there's property, we will rent it, we will sell it if necessary, and then we transfer the assets, the deadlift, to the persons who are to get it.
All right, so that involves a whole heap of work to make sure that essentially the right persons receive what they're supposed to receive. And I guess I want to just quickly touch on, because we know that it leads to so much more frustration, strife, and that kind of thing. Follow me anyway. How difficult is this process of working through? I think there's a lot of persons who are afraid of going through the Admin General's Department because they might just feel like, okay, when the government gets involved, it might become a little bit more complicated. But I want you to allay some of those fears and let persons know that, okay, when they come to you guys, it's going to be done with the best interest of everybody concerned. I just want to establish that before we go any further.
Excellent question, Vaughn. So just to give a little history, we're not a new department. We are in our 152nd year, so it's been around for a long time. When it comes to dealing with deadlift, the law is very clear as to what you can do, what you can't do, what you're supposed to do. And if you don't do it, you can go to the court and you have to pay money for anything that you did not do correctly. So we have a lot of rules, we have a lot of policies, we have a lot of procedures that protect, because it's an important role. In essence, anything that the person could have done when they're alive, we can do it now that they're dead. So you have a lot of responsibility, and once you have responsibility, you have to balance it. Once you have rights, you have to balance it, responsibility. So we're not going to just jump in and sell off your assets. Person says, oh, but the government's selling, so we should have a sale. No. If we ever have to sell an asset, we have to get a valuation report. We have to go and do bids, and we have to make sure that the bids are above the market value. So we're all about protecting the asset, preserving it. If we can make it grow more than it's valued at now, excellent, we do that as well. So you don't have to be concerned about the government not taking control of your assets. The government itself, it's a trust, so they can't come in and take up your property, they can't come in and take up your money. That's the role of the Administrator General herself. It's called a trustee, a fiduciary. So it's to protect the money for whoever you owe. That will never go away, not because you're dead. You still have to pay all the hire purchase companies. You still have to pay the car loan, the credit card that you maxed out. We still have to pay it. So we pay all the persons that you owe, and then the balance goes to your loved ones, your beneficiaries.
All right, that's
So
great.
yeah,
So,
come and report it to us. We will take you through the process. It's something that we've been doing, as I said, for 152 years, so we know what to do. There's no doubt about that, and we can guide you through the process.
all right, so a quick reminder to those watching us online, this is an interactive show. If you have questions for Miss Carty, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll ask and see if we can get an answer for you right away. That's the purpose of the show, to build that bridge with us and our different organizations and different roles and functionaries within the government, so that we can foster greater understanding and build a better relationship and rapport. All right, that's where we're here. So today we are talking specifically about the recent decision by the government to essentially adjust the value of a what is determined to be a small estate from $100,000 to now 1.5 million. So give me a bit of the backstory behind that, Miss Carty. Talk to me about what led to that official decision and why we made that decision, or why did that come to fruition at this time?
So as I said, we do a lot of estate administration, and what we found is that a lot of persons are coming in and they have 200,000, 300,000 an estate. And when they did the investigation to see how much it would cost to get a private attorney, they said, you know what, don't bother, because it didn't really leave them with much left over after they would have paid the fees.
Mm-hmm.
And so we looked at what is the average balance in a bank account. And as you said, foster relationships. We looked at JDIC, Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation. They would have done extensive research in 2020, and they said the average balance for 97% of the population is 1.2 or below. And so we said, okay, that was 2020, we're now in 2024, so inflation and so forth. 1.5 should cover the average bank balance for over 95% of the population. So that person to be able to access it, and we would be able to do it for them without having to get a grant from the court once they come in, if it is just personality. So what that means, if you have a piece of land, regardless of the value, you don't come in this category at all. So it has to be that you have 1.5 or less in all the assets that don't include land. So your motor vehicle, your bank accounts, if you have shares, whatever it is, your salary that you have that you didn't collect because you died on the 22nd, you didn't get paid as yet. If it is that you are contributing to NHT, remember NHT almost always has about 8 years in the back for you once you're a regular contributor. We can apply for them to give us those funds as well. So once all of that, when you add it together, is less than 1.5, we can collect all the assets, do a notice in the newspaper to say we're in charge of Stacie Ann Carty's estate. If you're owed anything by her, bring in your receipts. Let us see what it is so we can pay the bill, and then we pay the bill and give the balance to your beneficiaries.
Right, you had mentioned before that you said when persons may look at their estate and see that it's valued like about 200,000, that kind of thing, and then when they think about what the process would be or how expensive it would be to maybe I guess retain a lawyer to go through that in a much more in the private sector. Like, is there a difference, I suppose, because it just begs the question of whether it is that there's a difference in cost or approach or something when you go through the AGD relative to going through maybe like a private lawyer or something like that.
So we still have to abide by the same laws. There's no generally specific law that tells us that we're not going to have to get a grant. We have to do the same things, right? The law is clear on who is going to get what. If you don't have a will, there's law that says you failed to plan, and so if you didn't make a will, these are the people who are going to benefit from your estate. So it's the same thing that happens whether you're a private person or not. But we have a fee schedule which Parliament would have passed to show what we can and cannot charge.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody comes to us and reports a small estate, so come to me, Vaughn, and you tell me what you have. Make sure it doesn't pass 1.5. So tell me the 3 things that you have. You have your motor vehicle, let me help you. That's valued 600,000. What else do you have?
I might have some cash in the bank, right. I mean, maybe like some savings about, at 300,000, something like that.
Right.
And then
right.
maybe
that is 900,000.
Yeah. And then I might have.
And since you work at GIS, they're paying your monthly statutories, and so you have some money at NHT as well. And we do the application online, and when we add everything together, it doesn't come to more than 1.5. So what we're going to be charging you is maximum of 2 things. 6%, which is an executor's commission. Every executor, public, private, in between, by law can charge a 6%. And we also charge an investment fee of 0.75%. because we invest all the funds that we have together in a common pool to maximize the return. Because remember, we're trying to grow your assets as well, So until we pay it out, it's on investment, and our rate is quite good actually, because inflation I think right now is 6 or 6.5, and our rate of return on the fund is 9.5. So we're way above in the inflation. You're actually getting a good return, and we would pay your bills and give the rest to your beneficiaries. So you might ask me, who are your beneficiaries? Because you didn't make a will,
Exactly.
didn't want
I
to
would
talk
imagine
about
persons.
inevitable.
I just imagine that the persons who find themselves in the small estate category tend to be persons who may die intestate, don't leave a will, that kind of thing. I'm just
You
assuming
must,
here,
you must,
but
you can come and work with us, man, Vaughn. But definitely, once you are a small estate, you had to die without a will. If you had a will, your executor deals with that. And so, if it is you die without a will, let's say you have a wife and a child. One child, the wife gets 2/3, the child gets 1/3. If you had a wife and more than one child, the children get 50%, the wife shares the other 50. So, what you can also think about whilst you plan or fail to plan is, was there anybody else I would have wanted to get some of my assets? Because if you failed to make the plan, those are the people who are going to benefit. So if mommy was dependent on you for paying her mortgage, giving her some spending money, buying her groceries, paying her rent, whatever it is, you can see that there's nothing for her to get in that scenario. Parents will never get once you have a child. So those are things that you can think about. The only way the parent may get is if you had no child and a spouse, or if you had no spouse. So you would like to think about all the people who possibly are dependent on you and plan for it. But if you fail to plan, we're here. And if you fail to plan and your assets were under 1.5, it's something that we can do relatively speedily uh, to administer your estate and pass the assets over. And we also do focus on persons who have more than 1.5 in assets and have minors as persons under 18, children as beneficiaries. And the reason for that is that we find that dead left brings out some interesting characteristics in persons.
yeah, look
And
at you trying
they,
to be so diplomatic.
I know, right? And so the child's interest is not always the priority. And so we come in to protect the child, because the child could be one when the person dies, the parent dies, or where the school fee is going to be paid. How is the child going to ensure that they have light, water, lunch money? Children are always buying new clothes because they're always growing. Those kind of things. That's what we do to protect the interest of the child. So we actually have quite a few children on monthly payments, and every month the amount is deposited to their caregiver's account from their inheritance so that they can live.
All right, it leads to a question that we got online from Charnel Henry. She's asking, does the AGD intervene when there are adult children or relatives of the deceased in disagreement about the division of the deadlift?
Okay, so disagreement about division of deadlift is not something new. I think if you go in the Bible, you will see quite a bit of that. You have the prodigal son, you have Cain and Abel, could go on and on. So it's something that is going to happen. And as I said, most of us in Jamaica don't make a will. And so we have had to limit our involvement because there's just too much. And so we do focus on estates where there are children or other persons who are somehow challenged that we need to protect their vulnerable. So it could be a child with, or somebody, not necessarily a child, with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, so that they need somebody to protect them. So by default, we're going to protect that vulnerable group. That's our focus. But we legally can do any estate. We have the ability to. It's just a matter of resources. So Charmaine, you said her name is?
Charnel.
Charnel, sorry. We wouldn't get involved in that situation if everyone is an adult and able to take care of themselves, unless you went to the court and got a court order and the court mandated us to do it.
All right, so I wouldn't say necessarily, well, not to say you pick and choose, but you do admit, overlook, and once there is an executor, you said, oh, well, there's already a person doing that job already, then you step in where there is no clear executor and so on, so that persons can have some.
But most importantly, where you have the vulnerable groups, the children or persons with medical disabilities or physical disabilities, that's our focus because of just the sheer volume. And so we can, as I said, though, we can't do anything because the court also might say, Charnel could say this executor is not doing their job. She took him before the court, and the court ordered that that person must not be the executor anymore, or revoking the grant. And on many occasions, the court has done that and appointed us to take over as administrator of the estate. So we do have matters where we have wills We do have matters where, as you said, there's discontent between the parties, and the court says there's an independent party who knows what they're doing, let them do it. And we have many of those matters. But if we're going to choose, we're focusing on those where you have children who can't take care of themselves, have no voice at the table, or persons who are vulnerable.
But it begs the question now, in terms of making this switch to or raising the value of the estates that you classify as small, do you anticipate would this change lead to an extension in the turnaround time? So, for example, maybe if the estate was still at $100,000 based on what you'd have to do, would it necessarily take? Will it take a longer time now? If first family trying to start things out decides to come through the AGD to see if they can get things sorted out, which is going to take a longer time than one would typically expect?
Estate administration is not quick. I must say that.
Okay, let's establish that as a baseline,
Let's establish that. It's not a same-day process. You have to understand that what it involves is us doing a fact finding. Let's call it that. It's like a scavenger hunt of sorts. And so we have to, you come to us, you may know that they have one account at a specific bank. But Jamaican persons are also very secretive. So you don't even know the full extent of what they have or where. So we know as a independent third party who don't even know you or the deceased has the right to every possible organization that could have money for them. We're going to write to all the financial institutions, all of the insurance companies, the person who employed them. We're going to do an application NHT online. So we're going to also search the land database to see if they had lots, or doing a complete search. And remember that we have to get a response, because we can't just log on to the bank and check. We're writing to them to find out. So it also depends on how long they take to respond to us. So yes, there is a lag, and we have seen increased volumes of small estates since it started in the end of August. And so there will be a little delay, but I can say that I think it's worth it, because if it is that you need the funds in the account and you don't take it, after a certain number of years, I believe it's 15 years with no transactions on their account, you'll see the ad in the newspaper, unclaimed balances, and it goes to the consolidated fund. So it would make sense for you to report it to us. Our aim is to assist you in getting the monies out, the assets from under the person's name who has died, and transfer it to the next generation of their beneficiaries. It's all about building generational wealth, unlocking money that you can invest in productive endeavors. So it's something that's worth it. But as you can imagine, we're going to have increased volume, and so it's something that will have an effect on how speedy we can get it out, because it also means our partners have more work to do for us as well.
So now let's take a step back. I know that in terms of determining the value of my estate and whether or not I classify for this small estate, one would have to have a certain amount of knowledge about this. And I say that because I think there are many Jamaicans who probably just think like, well, me not have nothing. Me not really. Me not have no will. If I like, many persons are reticent about writing wills because they probably just think, after me not really have nothing to go pass on to nobody. We just have like one and two things them, yes, and this. So I want to get into that a little bit detail, provide some better clarity to members of the public about what constitutes these assets that what we do when you come in and you start looking over their situation and that kind of thing. What do you classify as assets beyond, for example, some money in a savings account, and maybe a one vehicle if I had that, or you know what I mean? If maybe there's more to it than meets the eye. So I just want to provide some clarity where that is concerned.
Let's not diminish the value of the one vehicle.
I'm just saying, what are the most obvious things? The most obvious things
the most usual asset class would involve a vehicle. It involves money in either a credit union, a building society, a commercial bank. Sometimes it's money in an investment house. Sometimes it's shares, because persons are buying shares. Sometimes it's also, as we spoke about, land. So you might have land that you bought. You might have family land that was willed to you by your great-grandfather or your father or something of the sort. You have persons, as we said, you're working and we don't get paid every day. So most times your employer has an amount for you in salaries that is not yet paid. Sometimes some people work and don't even take vacation. So the vacation, when you leave the employment, has a value. So death would be termination from employment. So that has a value as well. Sometimes it is that you give somebody a loan, your partner draw. there are various things that are assets that sometimes we don't think of that we need to think through. So anything of value is an asset that we need to think through. Also, I will always say, because it's a very common asset as well, your NHT refunds. If you are paying every month your statutories, it is something that is deposited to your benefit, and NHT, once we do the application, will pay all the monies they have plus interest, and oftentimes that is above the 100,000. So you have that you are also entitled to. So these are things we must think about. You could have written a will for every one of those assets. We have a will form on our website under forms, www.agd.gov.jm, and walk yourself through and look at all the things you could have. You could have an insurance policy. Sometimes persons don't name a beneficiary, they name estate on insurance policy, or sometimes they name their parent, and the likelihood is that the parent will predecease them. And then when the parent dies, whether it's grief or you just completely forgot, you didn't change the name. Some persons contribute to a pension fund and they don't have a beneficiary name, or the beneficiary died before them. And so all of those things come to the estate as well. Some people have a business, you have a shop, you have a one shop or your bar, and all the things, the inventory in there, if you're a sole trader, are assets for your estate. So there are some businesses that we're actually have to wind up when it comes to us, and we have to sell out the inventory. Or it gets interesting. You have musicians or creatives, not just musicians, who have royalties coming to their estate, and that doesn't die because you die. That's an income source that continues for years, and we also have to make sure that we collect those assets as well. So everybody's situation is unique, and so you have to look at your life and really think about what in my life has value, and these are your assets.
That's fascinating. In terms of what in your life has value, it really boils down to if you can ascribe a dollar value to something in your life and you can establish that you want it passed on to somebody else, that kind of thing, the AGD will step in and ensure that those wishes are carried out essentially.
Well, if you have a will, you'd have an executor, hopefully. So the executor would do that, and that's what we're advocating. That person should make a will so that they can outline what their wishes are. Because remember, a will, you can put your preferred burial spot. Some people want a specific song at their funeral. Some people have a specific casket or hearse. They want what you call it? Oh my gosh, glass hearse that they want.
Yeah. Like a chariot.
So all of those kind of things, chariots, that's where you put it in your will. So that person's know. Some persons don't want to be cremated. They want to be buried. All those kind of things you can write in your will rather than just talking about it. So Jamaican persons love to talk. We're very oral, but for will, it has to be in writing.
Right.
It's very specific. It has to be in writing.
So you mentioned, just caught my attention a while ago, in terms of, you said even partner draw, if somebody's, if it's written, I would imagine that means it has to have been written down, and there's some essential record of saying that this person owes me money, and that kind of thing.
Be written down, but remember, contract doesn't only have to be in writing. It can be oral, but you just have to have documents in support, evidence in support of it. So sometimes it could be that the banker would say, I have a draw for so and so, or so and so gave me a loan and I didn't finish repaying it. So some things are in writing, and some things are just knowledge, general knowledge of the family members or persons close to them, and we collect those assets as well.
It's just fascinating that I can imagine you, AG, knocking on somebody's door and saying, well, I believe you have a partner draw for such and such. We're here to collect on that person's behalf. Is that something that you find, you did say it's quite unique, a very unique field that you find yourself in. Is that something that is a possibility of happening?
So we're not knocking on your door. We're likely going to write you or call you. And it's something that we do with collecting assets. That's our legal role as what you call fiduciaries, to call in the assets. It's called calling them in, collecting them. If it was your money and you knew somebody owed you money, what would you do?
Say no more. I believe you know the answer to that.
Exactly. And we have what you call a duty of care to act as a prudent business person would. And no prudent business person is going to leave money hanging somewhere. You need to collect it.
So while we have your attention, I guess the question also emerges of, is the administration of small estates different from that of, larger estates, or is the only distinction or difference really just having to do with land?
So two things. The land is a big thing, and also the ability, the money, of course. 1.5 versus over and under versus over.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is, when it's a small estate, you don't have to get what you call a grant of administration. So legally, the grant is what gives you authority to collect the assets as I spoke about, invest the assets, sell the assets, administer the estate. So when it's a small estate, you don't need that grant at all. Just by virtue of you being Administrator General, you can collect all the assets. So you skip that entire process, which for a private person going to an attorney, going through the courts, that can take anywhere from 3 months to a year. So you skip that entire process of having to draft those documents and the cost. The cost is 8% of, for us, is 8% of the value of the estate. So that entire cost is not paid by the estate.
So you have essentially you have a bit more of a free hand to step in and move quickly to settle the affairs once you're dealing with a small estate, so to speak.
Free hand is not the one I would use, but I guess what you're saying is that you have less legal restrictions. Yes,
less restrictions, so to speak.
Less restrictions than someone who does not have the benefit of this piece of legislation that Parliament passed. Yeah, so it should make it speedier. That's the aim, and it has made it speedier when we had 100 and less. And so persons, it also makes it less costly because, as I said, you don't have that fee of the 8% that we charge on the regular estates.
Right. So I guess just continue looking at it from the flip side. It requires much more legal intervention and much more, I suppose, documentation to be drafted and much more steps and procedures that are involved when you go through it from that dealing with a larger estate, so to speak.
It's the same, really. It's the same. But what it is that the Parliament would like persons to have access to their estates and what persons have left behind, and especially where it's a small value, to reduce the barriers. So you want to reduce the cost that persons have to pay to access the funds. You want to reduce the legal barrier of you not knowing an attorney or you not being able to afford an attorney. And so it's like a social service that the government is providing to ensure that we can build upon generational wealth, unlock the funds that are sitting in an account, unlock the funds that are sitting with an employer, sitting with NHD, so that persons can have access to it to live their everyday lives or invest in a business, whatever it is, dependent on the quantum or what you'd like to do. So it's really to pass the wealth from one generation to the next, which is what estate administration is about.
No, I know we've established before that the estate planning and the process of ensuring that the estate is administered, I suppose, fairly, efficiently, effectively, that kind of thing can be a very lengthy process and so on. And so I guess the next question I would want you, for members of the public who are maybe weighing this possibility as an option for whether or not, if they have a small estate or know of some other situation, they should proceed with the AGD. What kind of confidence should they have in your ability to ensure that this is administered fairly and effectively and that the right outcome occurs at the end of the day? Because there's a tendency to believe that if I go through government, it's probably going to take 10, 15, 20 years or something like that, and it might just be a lot more trouble than it's worth if I go private. So I guess I want you to speak to the confidence persons should have in the ability of the department to ensure that the estate is administered fairly, effectively, and efficiently.
You don't have to have a challenge with fairly, effectively, and efficiently. As I said, we have structures in place. The law is very clear as to what we can and cannot do. We have internal auditors, external auditors that monitor to ensure that we are adhering to processes. So processes are very clear. There's no doubt about that. What will delay the process is oftentimes the time it takes for our stakeholders to respond to us. So, for instance, Vaughn, you died, or I died, let me not put death on you, and no will was made. And I know as AGD have to write to all the banks. Now, can you imagine AGD is writing to the banks for every estate that is reported to us? We get at least 400 reported every year. So they're getting at least 400 letters for each person that they have to have the capacity to respond. So sometimes there's a delay in how quickly the response is made, and that sometimes will delay our ability to obviously take control of the assets, pay the debt, and then distribute. So that's something that persons can or need to understand, that we're not holding the asset. We have to investigate before we can collect and distribute. And so that is oftentimes the biggest hurdle, how long it takes for them to respond and then send the funds to us. But When it comes to who must get what, the law is very clear. I don't want to get too legal, so I've avoided the name of any legislation, but for all those who want to go and look at it, the Interstate Estates and Property Charges Act, look at Section 4. It has what you call a table of distribution, and it's very clear who must get what. There's no ambiguity there. So persons may be upset because they might think that they should have been on the table or they should have been higher on the table, but there's no ambiguity as to who must get what.
All right. No, I
When
guess
you don't make
as we kind of move to bring things down, a question I have. I know you mentioned before that when it comes to like unclaimed bank balances or money in account of a person who may have died, and there's a particular amount of time before it reverts to the state, to the consolidated fund, and that kind of thing. Is there outside of perhaps like these bank accounts, and is there a particular length of time that a person has to come to you to get the process of settling their estate? So I can just imagine, for example, a person who may not necessarily know or be too familiar with the fact that, you know, or what the AGD does and that kind of thing, and so perhaps their loved one may have died a year or 2-3 years ago, and maybe they were engulfed in grief and simply just did not have the capacity to go through and do the process and all that kind of thing. How, at what point, or is there a cutoff point that after which you can't step in and get involved again to kind of help look after the situation?
For us, there's no cutoff point. Some persons come 5 years after the person has died. The only challenge for us is where the person died in a fatal accident. So let's say a car crash, the person has died. Legally, what we do when person has died in a crash, we get a police report to do some investigation to see if the person died because someone else was wrong. So someone else was negligent. And so if somebody else was negligent, we're going to sue that person to get some money for the estate. And the law has timelines. So based on the two pieces of law that we can sue them under, you have a timeline of 3 years and a timeline of 6 years. So if the person died in an accident and you come to us in this, that asset or the possibility of recovering from that asset is pretty much lost, with few exceptions, right? And so we would suggest the person as soon as possible report it to us, because there are some assets that you can lose, but generally, no, there's no timeline. Report it to us and we'll do the investigations.
All right, so there you have it, people. If you know, no matter how long or, well, you know, no, go as soon as possible. Definitely go as soon as possible. But notwithstanding how much time has passed, you still may have the opportunity to step into the AGD. That's the Administrator General's Department. There's another AGD, that's the Accountant General's Department or the Attorney General's Department. There are a couple of them. So get
and the Auditor General. So this one is Administrator General.
Administrator General's Department. Step into the Administrator General's Department. Have the conversation and see what can be done, because it may very well be that something you didn't even necessarily think was an asset could find a way and find its way into your possession. And as Miss Carty has been stressing, it's about generational wealth. It's about being able to pass on the assets from one generation to the other, so that there's, you know, the opportunity to explore whatever other kind of goals or objectives that you have in your life. And before you never know, you could be sitting on something, or you could have something in your possession that could change your life. You know what I mean? So it makes sense to pay attention to what is available to you, what assets are available to you. And they might just be able to help you determine that something you didn't even know was an asset actually is, and you can take advantage of it. All right, Mrs. Carty. So I think I'm going to just, we're going to move to wrap and kind of bring things around. I always like to just, repetition is the key to learning. So I always like to just circle back to the start and then just kind of bring things, full circle. So insofar as the government having taken the decision to move the value of a small estate from $100,000 to now $1.5 million, let's just establish what the benefit of that and how persons will be able to reap benefits from that going forward.
Sure. So what that means is that persons can access any asset once it's not including land, and the value is at most 1.5. So it can't go over 1.5. They can come to us, they bring proof that the person is dead, so the death certificate, burial order can work, and also proof that the person has an asset. So if it is a bank account, they can tell us where the bank is. If it's a motor vehicle, we will copy the title or the registration or the fitness. And we will then investigate, confirm that this asset exists, and we will collect the asset, pay any debts, and then move the asset from the deceased person to whoever the law declares is their beneficiary, because remember, they died without a will. So the law will declare who their beneficiary is, and we just pass it to that person. So as we spoke about before, it's about building generational wealth. It's easier to start from with a step of 1.5 and starting in a negative or from zero. And so you can look at it as not just to be say, oh, I can't bother. It is giving the persons who have survived you the benefit of starting from somewhere rather than starting from behind.
All right, and just establish the difference between us, because you had mentioned insofar as not necessarily just relating to the dollar value of the estate. You had mentioned about land as well, and some persons might be thinking that okay, we might have a small piece of land, it probably worth less than 1.5 or something. Is that also a consideration?
Right. So once there's land involved, it's not a small estate. So once there's land, even if it's worth $50, which will never happen in Jamaica, but if it's worth anything under 1.5, it's not a small estate if there's land. Small estates are anything except for land that when you add up the value of everything that the person owns is less than 1.5. So if you have something that is worth $1 million, you'll go to a private attorney and they could take you through the procedure. But this is focused, small estates, on persons who have no land and they have died with assets not exceeding 1.5.
All right. Okay. And I think I will just give you this last moment. I'll just give the last word to you in terms of anything that beyond this latest development insofar as the value of the small estates. Is there anything else that the AGD, the Administrator General's Department, would like the members of the public to know about them, or anything that you would just encourage them to come in and have a talk with you about going forward, so that they just a parting shot to members of the public to understand and appreciate the value of the work done by the AGD?
So just to say, I did say that deadlift is one of our core businesses. The other one is trust services. So we have actually quite a few trusts to take care of persons who are unable to take care of themselves. So for instance, we have trusts for children with cerebral palsy. So they're living, their parents may have died, and they have some money that is coming to them. And we would give them money monthly so that they can live. So sometimes they might need diapers, they might need someone to live with them. You might need someone to go and buy everything for them, food, clothing, care for them. And those are some of the services that we do offer for trusts for persons who can't take care of themselves. So if you have someone in your life and you're concerned, they're younger than you think you might not outlive them, but you want an institution that can continue the care, that is something that we do as well.
All right. And if there's any other questions that you have for them, you want to get in touch with the Administrator General's Department, you can visit their website. That's agd.gov.jm. That's right. I got that right, Ms. Carter.
You got it right.
All right.
Or 12 Ocean Boulevard in Kingston, or 42 Union Street in Mobley on the NHT building.
Right. You can always give them a call at 922-1830 at the area code. That's 876-922-1830. Get them a call and see if they can work something out for you. You never quite know. It might just be the best call you ever make. All right. With that said, people, I think it's time for us to wrap. Thank you to everyone who tuned into our discussion. And if you have a question, we spoke about something that piqued your interest, piqued your curiosity, and you'd like to talk about it some more, not to worry, drop it in the comments. We'll see if we can get in touch with Miss Carty and then see if we can get an answer for you. All right. Now, remember, our audience plays a major part in our show. So if there's anyone in particular you'd like us to have in studio, let us know. We'll try to have that person in studio as soon as possible. Do not forget to follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Jamaica Information Service. Just search for us. You'll find us. We're there. You'll see who will be in studio next. And I'd like to think you guys are on social media as well, right, Mrs. Carty?
We are. We are on Instagram at administrator_general, I believe it is the handle. We're on TikTok as well as X.
All right, so give them a call, just pay them a visit, visit them online, see what they're going on with, see if they can benefit you, and who knows, it might just be in your favor. All right, so we do this every week live online in our different social media platforms. I have been your host, Vaughn Davis, and this has been Studio 58A Live. Thank you again for joining us, and please have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care to everyone, especially Ms. Carly. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.